Welcome back. In a moment, we'll return to our discussion about cancer and examine the stigma that follows the disease. But first, here are some other stories to keep an eye on. The leaders of the Colombian FARC rebel group have once again travelled to Bogotá to sign a new peace agreement. The last deal was voted down in a public referendum. If ratified, a peace agreement would bring an end to the world's longest fought conflict, spanning 5 decades. Tensions are rising in Haiti as the country waits for the results of a hard-fought presidential campaign. Supporters of 2 rival candidates have taken to the streets, claiming they are heading for victory. The results of the vote are not expected for several days. And ousted Egyptian President Mohamed Morsi will be retried on terrorism charges after the country's highest appeals court overturned his previous conviction. It comes only a week after his death sentence was related to a mass prison break was quashed. Let's return now to our discussion about cancer. In this part of the programme, we'll get the latest on global efforts to tackle various forms of the disease. But first, let's return to the issue of the stigma around the disease and how family and colleagues can often find it difficult to talk to people once they are diagnosed. As an example, here are some of the facts from research here in the UK. 20% of UK managers are more uncomfortable talking about cancer than any other chronic illness. 17% told the cancer sufferers' colleagues about their illness without their permission. There are 560,000 people in the workforce with cancer today, and statistics estimate this will rise to 4 million by 2030. We'll be talking to Lara Bennett on Skype call from Scotland, who's the Science Communications Manager for Worldwide Cancer Research, in just a moment. But still with me in the studio is Liz Egan, who's the Programme Manager at Macmillan Cancer Support. You're focusing on the workplace and difficult conversations there. Confidentiality surely is absolutely key. If you share your medical condition with your boss, you don't want that going round as office gossip, do you?
That's correct. Everyone has a right to privacy, and actually they're protected under the Data Protection Act from their, in the UK, from their health condition being revealed to other colleagues. So we recommend to line managers that people's right to privacy is respected. And we see this issue as a big issue in the workplace these days. 1 in 3 people in the UK who are living with cancer of working age, and we know those figures are going to rise to 1.7 million by 2030. And we believe it's more important now than ever for employers to actually take notice of this issue and be prepared and be ready for
do you have an opinion
about
to share or not to share? What's the best thing to do for a cancer patient?
Well, we would recommend to a cancer patient to disclose their cancer to their employer and to their colleagues. And the reason we do that is because under equalities legislation in the United Kingdom, cancer is classified as a disability, but your employer needs to know that you have been diagnosed with cancer before any of those protections come into play. And those protections include a right to reasonable adjustments in the workplace, to support you to stay in your job, and also protects you from being treated unfairly because of your cancer in the workplace. So we believe it's very important that employees disclose their cancer to their employer and to their colleagues.
Okay, let's bring Lara Bennett in on the conversation. Lara, at one time, the word cancer and a premature death were automatically associated one with the other. That's not necessarily the case now.
That's right. In the UK, over 50% of people now survive cancer. But there are huge discrepancies between the different cancer types. So, for example, testicular cancer, 98% of men now survive, and 85% of women survive breast cancer. But there are still cancers like pancreatic cancer and esophageal cancer where survival rates are still very low, at just a couple of percent. So although in general more people are surviving cancer, there is still more work to be done and more research needed until all cancers can be beaten.
And if there was one bit of advice that the medical profession would pass down to us as patients, is it early questioning, early diagnosis that can really help in these situations?
Yeah, I mean, early diagnosis is very important. The earlier cancer is diagnosed, the higher chance of successful treatment. But I'd like to point out that between 30 and 40% of cancer cases are actually caused by lifestyle factors. So, for example, smoking is the single biggest preventable cause of cancer, closely followed by obesity. So people often don't realise that being overweight, for example, can increase your risk of cancer. in general, cancer is a disease of older people, so more people are getting cancer, as in the population are aging. So 3/4 of people that get cancer are over 60. So by living longer, we have a higher risk of cancer, but we can also take preventative measures. For example, not smoking, maintaining a healthy body weight, and eating a balanced diet, plenty of fruit and vegetables, can all help reduce our risk of cancer.
It's probably not very helpful, but you've all heard the conversation, I'm sure, when people say, but I know Uncle Sid, he smoked 80 a day, he lived until his 90s, and he wasn't particularly healthy. There's always the exception that attempts to prove the rule. Are we deceiving ourselves by relying on those things?
Yes, I mean, as you said, that there are always the exception to the rule, and I'm certainly not suggesting that everybody that's overweight is definitely going to get cancer. All of these things increase our risk. We do know that smoking tobacco accounts for 20% of all cancer deaths, and 70% of lung cancer deaths are due to smoking. So there is, a very real risk with smoking. But there are various other things that can increase our risk. So we all now know that getting sunburn and long-term exposure to UV sunlight can increase our risk of skin cancer. So it's about sort of balance, really. And as I said, trying to live a healthy lifestyle with a good diet, low amounts of alcohol, and not smoking. And at the end of the day, we're living longer, so that increases our risk of cancer. And we all have different genes. We're all more likely to get some diseases than others. So our genes do play a huge factor, and accounts for the 90-year-old that smokes and drinks and doesn't get cancer.
What about hereditary factors? Does that make it important that families share information and are not secretive about an illness in later life?
I think in general, people are becoming more open and talking about sort of medical problems, for example, like cancer. There are certain genes like the BRCA1 and BRCA2 gene, which was brought into the media attention when Angelina Jolie said that she had that gene mutation. And they increase people's risk of certain types of cancer dramatically. And we're understanding, as scientists know more and more about cancers, we are understanding more genes that can slightly increase our risk. So it is good if people are able to talk to families about sort of genetic risks. Then it means that they can then be monitored more closely, and then cancer caught as early as possible, as you said, when cancer has the best chance of being treated successfully.
And what is the scientific outlook in terms of cancers generally? Is it going to be the case, do you think, there will be one medical breakthrough that will allow doctors to treat most cancers, or are they going to have to pick off these conditions one at a time with painstaking research into each set of circumstances?
I think for a while there was talk of a cure for cancer, and the problem with that is we talked about cancer as if it's the one disease, but the reality is cancer is over 200 different types of disease. So breast cancer is very different to bowel cancer, which is different to brain cancer. Worldwide cancer research, in fact, recently funded research showing that even bowel cancer should now be classified as 4 completely separate diseases. So we were understanding more that different cancers in different body type, in different areas of the body are different. But likewise, like you and I are different, we look differently, we act differently. My cancer would be different from your cancer. So we can no longer expect a sort of blanket one drug treats all approach. And the future of cancer treatment is very much involved in precision medicine, what we call sort of personalized medicine. So it's about looking at everyone's cancer at a genetic level and then picking the right treatments for that person. So another big area is what we call immunotherapy. So we all have immune systems that are busy fighting diseases, colds and flu viruses, and they can also fight cancer cells. But in some situations, they stop being able to fight these cancer cells. So scientists are now trying to harness this immune system power and reactivate the immune system to be introduced back into patients to beat cancer. So we are going to be seeing better treatments that are much more personal, and hopefully these should have fewer side effects for patients, unlike the sort of sledgehammer approaches of the traditional sort of chemotherapy and radiotherapy, which will still be used and play an important role, but hopefully we're going to see more tailored treatments for patients.
Lara Bennett, thank you for the moment. Let's turn to Liz Egan once again. Having heard that positivity, and there are so many good outcomes, it is a survivable condition. Is that a good stance to take, or can that instill false hope in your colleague, your family member or friend?
Well, I think it gives hope to people that in the future, or at present that some cancers can be treated and people can live with their cancer. And at Macmillan, what we're doing is we're trying to look at how employers can support people who live with cancer to stay in their work and not fall out of their work, and return to their work as a part of their normal life after treatment. And that is a big perception change. I think up to now there's been a feeling that if you get cancer, it's a terminal illness, and that's changed radically. But we need to change how society thinks about cancer. We need to change how employers think about cancer and employees think about cancer, and realize that actually for many people it's going to be a disease that they will live with for their lifetime. And so important that workplaces change and adapt and react so people can live as normal a life as possible.
So in fact, the more candid one is, if you have a family member who has cancer or survived cancer, or you've had it yourself, the more you share that information, within reason, I suppose, the better it'll be. It'll cease to have, or it'll eat away at that stigma associated with it.
Absolutely. This is about normalizing cancer, seeing it as a part of life, that we live with. And there is a huge opportunity here now to shift perceptions, and we all have a role to play, from the scientists to the charities. And in the workplace, employers have a huge role to play to help their line managers support staff with cancer, and to help their employees know that they have jobs and that they can return to normal life.
Liz Egan of Macmillan, thank you.
Thank you.
We end our programme with the Insight Bite. This is a little something that we feel you should know about. Today, it's the origami eye test. Taking inspiration from the Japanese art of creative paper folding, developers in India have created a testing device that spots refractive errors and looks a little like a paper telescope. The folding Phoropter is a low-cost, easy to assemble, and could allow millions in isolated developing communities to access eye care. It's hoped that quick and easy diagnosis will lead to treatment for the estimated 153 million people worldwide living with visual impairment. And that's all for now. I'm Martin Stanford. That was Insight.